Welcome to Hispanic Voices. My name is Gilbert Hernandez and I'm your host. And today we have two individuals representing Housing Opportunities Made Equal. We have their Executive Director, Scott W. Gehl, from Housing Opportunities Made Equal, and we also have Jennifer Kimura, affectionately known at the office as Jenna, right?
Yes,
Jenna?
yeah.
And Jenna is the fair housing attorney, and we'll talk a little bit about Jenna's work in a minute. But I want to start with Scott because Housing Opportunities Made Equal is moving into their 50th year anniversary of existence. And not too many organizations can claim 50 years of existence, especially in Buffalo, civil service organizations. Give me a little short synopsis of the journey. You've been with the organization now for more than 25 years, maybe.
Actually, for more than 30 years,
more
but,
than
I started with it very young, or that's the fiction I maintain.
So around, talk to me a little bit about how Buffalo was in the 60s, right?
All right, yes. Gilbert, thank you for having us on this morning. Home got started at a very exciting time in American history and in Buffalo. Back in 1962 or the beginning of 1963, people from what was then called the Buffalo Area Council of Churches, clergy, women, religious, concerned lay people, were looked at the housing situation, and they wanted to study the magnitude of discrimination, which at that point in time was all pervasive in Buffalo,
right,
as in nearly the entire nation, and they found that it was not even possible for African American or Latino families to be shown housing outside very limited areas of the city of Buffalo. They concluded correctly, it turns out, that the problem, though, was bigger than could be addressed by an ad hoc committee of the Council of Churches. And so they formed an independent organization that was initially called the Niagara Frontier Council for Freedom of Choice in Housing, which would have made for one of the world's worst acronyms. By 1963, they took the name Housing Opportunities Made Equal.
Now, this is during the whole civil rights movement. There was no, were there any laws
when Home got started, there were no laws against discrimination in the private housing market. At the end of 1963, New York State enacted the Metcalf-Baker Act, which is now part of the human rights law, that prohibited discrimination for some reasons in some private housing. But this was still 5 years before Congress moved to pass the Fair Housing Act, in the wake of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. Now. So Home was an all-volunteer organization. Early members of Home, with whom I had the privilege to work when I was a very young man and came to work at the organization 30 years ago, talk about sitting down to dinner, and the phone would ring, and there would be another call from someone who had been a victim of discrimination, and people getting up from dinner and going to meetings to strategize how this family, denied housing, could be helped. It was very much in that sort of spirit that Home, an all-volunteer organization, got started. And Home at one point in time had 1,000 members in Buffalo and Erie County. Extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. So folks were actually channeled into particular areas for housing. For instance, African Americans had an area in the city of Buffalo where folks, they would be channeled, and that's where you would get housing.
And yes, and what occurred in Buffalo, as occurred in other cities, was that people who were victims of discrimination had to pay higher prices for lower quality housing.
Right. Now, Buffalo was segregated at that time, just like most of this country was, but it's still one of the top 10 segregated cities.
It is, and that's a
And
you
that's
know
unfortunate.
a
Yeah,
sad
it
fact
is.
of life
It is.
that Buffalo
50 years later.
can't claim top 10 status in many regards,
Yes.
but we are the
Well,
sixth
they-
most segregated
sixth most.
metropolitan area, the Buffalo
And the
Niagara
roots of that
metropolitan area.
segregation, I think, began in those early years, those
And,
60s.
and indeed, in very deliberate decisions by government in terms of when government first got involved in housing during the Great Depression. The Homeowners Loan Corporation, which was the predecessor of the FHA, drew lines on maps, and they began the practice of redlining. There were restrictive covenants that the real estate industry at that time used, and indeed FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, had a model restrictive covenant that said all future owners of a given piece of property, would be white, for example.
Oh, I see.
And policies like urban renewal, policies like segregation in public housing, policies like construction of expressways that facilitated white flight. All these practices led to the segregated landscape that we have today.
I'm going to continue this conversation, but I want to get Jenna involved in the conversation too. And how long have you been with home? How did you get interested in home? And
well, I grew up.
You grew up in Buffalo.
I grew up in Buffalo. I grew up in West Seneca and went to undergrad at University of Buffalo, and then I completed my law school experience in Cleveland Marshall College of Law. And that's where I was able to participate in the Fair Housing Clinic in Cleveland. And I primarily did this for experience, and I didn't really know what it was about until I started working with victims of housing discrimination in Cleveland. And Cleveland is also extremely segregated. I think it's the 5th most segregated metropolitan area.
It's down the road.
Right. So when I moved back to Buffalo, I was really looking to get involved, and I, searched about a housing discrimination civil rights organization where I could actually volunteer, and came up with Home. And so I reached out and just looking to volunteer my services, and that's how I got involved with Home. So I've been there since 2008, and then officially.
So you're officially the housing, the fair housing attorney.
Yes.
The fair housing. And let me get into a little bit of that, because Home is not just a service-oriented organization in the sense that we provide information on housing and do some tenant training and work some studies with impediments to housing for various municipalities. But there's also a certain amount of grit about the organization for social change, and part of it is that we litigate discrimination cases with HUD, and we also, if that doesn't work, we'll go to
federal court.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, a lot of our cases that we receive are actually victims of housing discrimination, and clients will come in to report discrimination that has occurred. And what we do is we investigate it, and if we find positive testing evidence that there is a probable cause of determination, we will file. Generally, we file with HUD administratively, and then will be investigated by the New York State Division of Human Rights. And I would have to say the Home has an excellent record. We do file good causes of discrimination where we actually feel that the evidence is very strong.
Now, you file administratively with HUD, and what does that mean? What happens at HUD? I mean, do they have the power to really make any changes, or do generally these cases go on to the courts?
Yeah, it depends. HUD is a great organization where they do have the teeth to actually litigate these cases, and will research and investigate certain cases, and will charge them with discrimination. If it's filed with HUD and HUD decides to investigate it, then it will, and a reasonable cause determination of a discrimination occurred, then they will send that to the Department of Justice, which is really when the teeth come out. So.
And that's when change begins, I think, usually at the courts. Let me also say that this is not just for individuals getting discriminated or not allowed to live wherever they want to, or blatant discrimination by landlords. This is also about how their applications are set up, how their advertisement and marketing techniques to kind of gear, make sure that people that they don't want don't come looking for work.
You're exactly right.
For
sometimes discrimination isn't as blatant. So sometimes our clients come in and feel that something was funny going on, and so that's when we really try to investigate, and that's when the discrimination can come out in our reports.
Now, the investigation is usually in a form of testers that you send out and make sure that that whatever it is brewing is.
Yes, we will send out people who work with us, on a professional basis, but and they go out and they play the role of bona fide home seekers with characteristics, very similar to our clients, except in respect to the particular factor that we think caused the discrimination, be it race, be it the presence of children, be it national origin, sexual orientation.
Yeah, elaborate a little bit on that, because generally civil rights organizations are usually viewed as protecting minorities from housing discrimination. But that's not really the case.
Well, that's a piece of the puzzle,
right?
And indeed, from the era in which home got started, and indeed, we were incorporated in August 1963, and right after our incorporation, many of our founding members, got on a bus and went to Washington for the famous March on Washington. But there are many reasons that people are discriminated against, and the laws are very broad. Now, in the Buffalo metropolitan area last year, the most frequent reason people were denied housing, according to reports that came into home, was because they had children, families with children, and after that it was people denied.
Now, families with children across the board. It didn't matter. There could have been Latino, white families, African American families, Asian families.
And again, you get into the whole idea of stereotypes against different different types of renters or home buyers. After people denied housing because they had children, it was people denied housing due to their lawful source of income, or due to their race, or due to disability. Home also recorded complaints of discrimination last year due to national origin and sex and marital status, and age and sexual orientation. All these things are prohibited by law. All these are protected classes prohibited by law. But there are many deficiencies in the laws with which we work, exemptions, in them, and that makes the work of enforcing fair housing law that much more difficult. And frankly, it also is evidence of some ambivalence that Congress had and state legislatures have had in passing fair housing laws.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about an example of a case that would come up for litigation, either through HUB or through the courts? Then,
Well, I have a really great case. An example: a client came in and she alleged discrimination based on disability. What had happened was she has a mobility impairment, and she uses a crutch and sometimes a motorized scooter to get around, but is extremely independent, works full time. She found an ad and applied for an apartment in Lockport. And what had happened was, while she was visiting, she was using her crutch to help assist her. And at that time, the owner started, saying things and concerned about the winter. Granted, now she went to go view the apartment in August. Concerned she wouldn't be able to get around and things like that. But she ultimately was, she wanted the apartment. He said that she could have it. She went to meet him to give him the full security deposit because she was able to afford the unit. And what had happened at that time, again, bringing concerns up about her mobility impairment, her crutches, concerns about the snow. And she grew up in Buffalo. She can navigate the snow just like anyone else. And while it might have come up in a concerning way, it really discouraged the client, and ultimately she was denied that unit because of her disability. So what we ended up doing was filing with HUD. It was investigated with the New York State Division of Human Rights, and probable cause was determined that discrimination had occurred. And what had happened was she received a nice settlement, a 4-figure settlement, and she is extremely thrilled. And she sent a thank you card thanking Home for being in her corner when she really needed it.
And she never would have had that option if Home hadn't been there. I mean, she would have been on her own, and basically, pretty much.
Right, and she was actually fortunate to find Home, and she really said that she didn't know where else to go, but when she came across Home, she even knew it was discrimination. So that's when Home stepped in.
Give me some examples, you or Scott, about discrimination, application, discriminatory elements in an application, in a housing application, or marketing, or a newspaper clipping.
Well,
a lot of landlords have no idea.
Right, and Home usually approaches, landlords who have applications that ask questions about protected classes of the law. Now, I think that that many of us intuitively know we shouldn't be asking applicants for housing about their race. But many landlords will ask about children, they'll ask about marital status, they'll ask about age. Merely making that inquiry is evidence of discrimination. Now, inevitably we approach landlords who have done this, and we say, you probably didn't realize that this was against the law. Won't you change your application? And most landlords do. But some don't, and when they don't, we will, as the saying goes, make a federal case out of it, or a state case, depending on the particular statute. There has been a practice of discrimination in advertising. And indeed, there was a time when classified advertising pages, routinely had ads for married couple, no children, adults preferred,
college students only.
There was one particular ad that I recall for seeking a single European male, treble discrimination, if you will, and back in the mid 1980s, Home sat down with publishers, not only the Buffalo News, but publishers of the whole network of weekly papers that exist, and we said, look, this is against the law. Won't you stop publishing this? And they were all concerned about losing those ads to other publications. So we put together a publishers' voluntary agreement to end discriminatory advertising, and that agreement worked phenomenally well for 20 years until the internet. And until Congress passed something called the Communications Decency Act, which effectively shielded internet publishers from what people might put on websites. So we're fighting some of those same battles again in a different forum.
So part of the work that you guys do is to scan through all that advertising on an ongoing basis and find out whether or not some of these announcements or publications or information clips for housing discriminatory.
Right, and that is part of the very important social change
Right.
agenda of Home as a civil rights organization, as well as systemic initiatives that we do against communities that have discriminatory zoning,
Right.
against initiatives to pass local fair housing laws, and all of these statutes have come from Home.
Okay. We only have a few minutes, and I really wanted to get to these two other areas. One is the fact that you're approaching 50 years anniversary, and we're preparing for a 50-year annual dinner and a 50-year annual meeting. And I'm going to let Jenna talk a little bit about that. But before we go there, we also had a great year. You guys had a great year last year in the sense that your completion of almost completed of the project Main and Ferry. Give us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to say it's completed.
And we have some pictures to show the building. There it
yes.
goes. Wonderful looking building.
Home purchased a lovely and elegant but fire damaged and long vacant building on the northwest corner of Main and Ferry. We built a 3-story addition there behind it, and in on the first floor we have Home's offices, and on the second and third floors we have 10 energy efficient, barrier-free apartments for families of limited means. This was a tremendous project that began back in 2006. Finally completed in 2012, Home not only was able to save this elegant 19th century building, but really create the germ of economic development there on the corner of Main and Ferry, and create a home for 10 families.
Wow.
And we now have this wonderful office space that people can find, and indeed about 5,000 people come to Home every year for assistance, and our former offices were on the 3rd floor of an industrial loft building downtown, and people couldn't find us.
With bands on one upper floor.
That's right. But now they can, and we think that that in the longer run, more people are going to find us every year.
Now this is on Main and Ferry, so it's very accessible by bus and by train. So yeah, absolutely. And no more rent or landlords. You're your own landlord. Now, 50th anniversary. Give us what are we expecting?
We are so excited, Gil. As you said, the 50th anniversary, and to celebrate, we're gonna have an anniversary gala. And the theme is this year, building on the legacy, which is very appropriate because we were just talking about Home's legacy. And it's so important to build on that legacy since housing discrimination still exists in Western New York. And so we continue to do so. We are thrilled. We're going to have a lot of fun. It starts at 6 p.m.
Now, what date?
Friday,
give us some dates.
April 26th.
Okay.
The Buffalo Niagara Convention Center in its grand ballroom. 6 p.m. cocktail hour. And at that time, it's going to be filled with baskets. I brought some examples of some basket raffles. Thank you.
And there'll be about 50 of these.
Yeah,
so
nothing compared to what. There are a ton of baskets. We're going to have silent auction and a live auction, which We did receive a donation so far from Lamar for our live auction for 4 billboards to auction off, which is great to advertise.
And auctions that everybody wins, so you get.
Yeah, and everyone, and so that way everyone has a chance to win something.
Right.
We're going to have live music from the Old School B-Boys.
All right.
And keynote speaker from Congressman Brian Higgins, which is exciting because he has been such a long-time home supporter.
Yeah.
And he's always in our corner. And then we're just going to have a great time.
And it's going to be primarily dedicated to having a great time. I don't think there's not going to be too much meeting or annual stuff.
It's going to be so much fun that I have very little to do with it.
Yeah. It's going to be it's so much fun. It's going to be dancing, food, and drinks.
Give me a phone number folks can get a hold of either you, Scott, or Shannon on how to get tickets, how to advertise for this great event.
You can call us 716-854-1400. I'm in extension 14. You can certainly call me if you have any questions, if you want to advertise for the annual gala, as Gehl had said, purchase tickets, donate. We accept
donate
any
baskets,
donations.
right?
Yeah.
Any donations for the cause, okay? So, and this is April 26th at the Convention Center. Starts at 6 o'clock. Get your tickets now. They're going to be sold out. This is 50 years of extensive work. What else is in the future for a home? I know, Scott, I know you can't be pulling in another 10, 20 years. So.
I think what is, one thing that is in home's future is more systemic initiatives. I think that we, there is in Buffalo, Niagara, our 6th most segregated metropolitan area. There's also a big correlation between racial segregation and concentrations of poverty.
Right.
And so I think that there is going to be a move for new legislation that talks about inclusionary zoning, so that we create more opportunities.
What do you mean by
for
inclusionary zoning?
So that when you go to a municipality for a building permit for a multi-family development, you have to include some affordable units in that. And really, this is also similar to the work of Home's Greater Buffalo Community Housing Center, which helps low-income families that have a Section 8 rental assistance voucher take advantage of the full range of housing opportunities, in the metropolitan area.
Which we now have a campaign on the internet.
In fact, there is an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign, and I urge people to go to Home's website, www.homeny.org.
And click the link.
And click the link, and you'll see a little video about the program, and it's a wonderful program that has helped nearly 4,000 families, lease good quality housing, and really change their lives. And we'd like to get more people involved in that.
Now, so give me again the website. This is the Indiegogo.
Yeah. Well, but they can get to that by going to www.